Today's message is found in Genesis chapter 50, verses 15 through 21. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he treasured them and spoke kindly to them. And then in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, we have the following reading. Verse 21, Matthew 18:21. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times." Or as some translations say, 70 times 7. This is the word of God for the people of God. Today's message is called Easier Said Than Done. There are 3 expressions that are some of the most difficult to say. I am sorry, I forgive you, and Worcestershire sauce. No, but seriously, I forgive you might be one of the hardest things to say and to actually do, because it's tied to our emotions and to our memories. That's why Peter's question of Jesus is so important for us to remember. How many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Peter had just heard Jesus detail a process for holding church members accountable for actions that have brought harm to the community. Peter believes he knows the answer. It's 7 times. For in the sin, Peter has heard Jesus teach on that a person should be accountable for their actions. So 7 times sounds like a reasonable answer for balancing justice and mercy. But Jesus gives a far different answer. 77, or as I said, it can be translated 70 times 7. For someone who's as bad as math as me, that's 490 times, but I think that's the point. Don't keep up with the count. This is forgiveness on a major scale. The number is not the focus. Forgiveness is the focus. Now I'll leave the parable that follows, which is certainly instructional on forgiveness, but instead I'll go to a family story set in the ancient land of Egypt. Almost from the very beginning of Genesis, we see family trouble. Cain kills his brother Abel. Jacob and Esau are embroiled in a family dispute over inheritance, which Esau threatens to take the life of his brother. And now Jacob's children are carrying on the family tradition of feuding and fighting. Joseph, who's just a teenager, was a favorite of Jacob. He had a gift for interpreting dreams, and one of his own dreams was about his brothers bowing down to him, and that didn't sit well with his older brothers. Finally, they got tired of Joseph, and they decided to take his life. But instead, one brother intervenes and decides that they should sell Joseph into slavery and then fake a death story that would be accepted by the parents to say that he was killed by a wild animal. Years have passed, and Joseph's gift for interpreting dreams has landed him in the court of Pharaoh. He is possibly one of the most powerful men in the world at that time, second only to the Pharaoh. Jacob's family, like all of the region, had experienced a severe drought, and now a terrible famine has followed. But Joseph had prepared Egypt for it. 2 years into the famine, had sent Jacob's family, Jacob's sons, scrambling to find food. 22 years after betraying Joseph, they are now standing before him. Pharaoh has ordered that all of Joseph's family and all of their possessions be allowed to come into Egypt. Shortly after arriving in Egypt, though, Jacob dies. And after a period of mourning, the brothers of Joseph want to know, well, has Joseph really forgiven us? I mean, now circumstances are different now that our father's gone. Maybe that was really all that stood between us at the time and is keeping us safe. And so they make up this story about how Jacob had planned for Joseph to accept his brothers and to not seek revenge. So they ask each other, what if he pays us back in full for all the wrong that we've done to him? Instead, Joseph wept and answered their fears with these words, "Am I in the place of God?" Am I in the place of God? In other words, am I God? And since he wasn't, and since we're not, our justice is imperfect, and so often even our forgiveness can be less than perfect. Joseph had come to understand that beyond all the bad that had befallen him in his life, God had planned for good to come of it. That actually saved the lives of his family and millions of others, possibly. At least the entire country of Egypt had been saved by what had taken place. But what if we can't see a silver lining? What if the bad we saw is still the bad we see now? We may have to work on forgiveness long and hard. It might be easier said than done. Christopher von Kaufmann is an assistant professor of New Testament at Luther Seminary, and he wrote a piece recently reflecting on these passages called The Hardest Commandment. He talks about the commandment to love God and to love our neighbor, and he says, though, sometimes those can seem quite arbitrary when it comes to really a way in which we can measure them and understand that are we really doing them. But when it comes to forgiveness, there is a standard there, and it's a tough one. It makes it very hard when we're thinking about the call to forgive. He said, I'm haunted by forgiveness. He said he didn't realize he struggled with forgiveness until September 2nd, 2020. On that day, Kang Kek Lu, a leader in the Khmer Rouge, died. Now, you may not even remember the Khmer Rouge, but it was a terrible time between 1975 and 79 when a group of people decided to purge all of the people in the country of Cambodia that they thought were their adversaries and were possibly a threat. It's estimated that this genocide killed between 1.5 and 3 million people. And Kang Kek Lu ran one of their prisons. And he kept meticulous records, and he was personally responsible for the torture and death of over 15,000 people. After he was captured and he was tried for war crimes and for crimes against humanity, Professor Kaufman said that this trial occurred while he was in college, and he kept up with it, but it didn't really make an impact on him, at least until Kang Kek Lu died. Professor Kaufman said he reread the testimony and then his life changed. Unlike the other members of the Khmer Rouge, Kang Kek Lu had actually admitted his guilt. In 1996, while he was still a free man, Kang Kek Lu became a Christian and was baptized. And so, as a result, he felt great conviction of what he had done in his life. And so he confessed to his crimes and he asked for forgiveness. He alone admitted his responsibility among all the other leaders of the Khmer Rouge. Professor Kaufman said, I don't know if a week has gone by without me thinking of Kang Kek Lu and his confession and request for forgiveness. The thing is, Professor Kaufman is Cambodian, and many of those who were killed were members of his family. But as a Cambodian, and more importantly as a Christian, Kang Kek Lu's request for forgiveness was directed, he felt, at him. So he said, I asked Jesus, Lord, how often should I forgive? As many as 15,000 times? He said Kang Kek Lu had stretched his ability to forgive to the limits. The commandment to forgive is so hard, it's definitely easier said than done. An unknown author said this about forgiveness. Forgiveness is unlocking the door to set someone free and realizing you were the prisoner. And salvation, forgiveness lives, because God extends it to us through the death and resurrection of Jesus. Now go and ask for forgiveness. Or maybe you need to give someone forgiveness. But in the name of Christ, ask God for His forgiveness. For we certainly have all fallen short. This is the message of the gospel. This is the message of the cross. And this is the message for all ages. I hope to see you again here in the mountains next week.